The night sky over Mars was supposed to be calm, filled with stars, and the slow passing of trading ships moving between colonies. Families lived in domes, children played under artificial sunlight, and people believed their future was finally safe. But one night, without warning, everything changed. Shadows moved across the sky, massive shapes blotting out the light of distant suns. At first, people thought it was just a fleet of new cargo ships. Then, the first blasts fell. Fire tore through the domes, glass shattered, alarms screamed, and within seconds, entire districts were gone. People ran, shouting for their loved ones, searching for children, dragging the wounded. But the attackers did not stop. Their ships rained destruction with cold precision. Mars, the proud colony of humanity, burned as helpless citizens screamed into the night. Those who looked up caught a glimpse of their killers, alien ships black and sharp like blades slicing the void. They moved with a speed and power far beyond anything humans had seen. News traveled fast. Luna, the colony on Earth's moon, received the same fate. Massive explosions rippled across its surface, tearing apart mining bases and habitats. The survivors cried out on emergency channels, voices filled with terror. "They came out of nowhere. We can't fight them. Someone, please help us." Their desperate pleas reached Earth, but by the time any response was sent, it was too late. The attackers had left Luna in ruins. On Earth, people watched in silence as live feeds showed the destruction. Families gathered around screens, faces pale, hands shaking, unable to believe what they were seeing. Cities burning on Mars, the moon cracking under bombardment, people screaming in terror until the transmissions went dark. Billions across the planet sat frozen, their hearts filled with dread. Children asked parents if the aliens would come for them next, but no one had an answer. Inside the United Human Defense Command headquarters, the atmosphere was thick with fear. Generals and officials crowded into a war room, their faces grim, their voices rising in panic. Reports flooded in, casualty counts climbing into the millions, entire colonies erased in hours. "How do we fight this?" one officer demanded. "We're not ready for a war against something like this." Another slammed his fist on the table. "We can't let this continue. We need to respond now." But the truth was bitter. Humanity had ships, but they were scattered, smaller, weaker. Against an enemy of such power, the chances of survival seemed slim. Outside, in the streets of Earth's great cities, people protested, shouted, cried. Some demanded war, others begged for peace. Rumors spread quickly that the aliens saw humans as pests, that they wanted to enslave Earth, that they would not stop until every last human was gone. Fear turned to anger, and anger turned to despair. Across the world, silence hung heavy, broken only by the endless news of destruction. In one small Martian settlement, a boy named Ryan hid with his sister under the wreckage of their home. He pressed his hands over her ears as explosions thundered around them, trying to keep her calm even as his own body shook. He whispered promises he wasn't sure he could keep, telling her they would survive, telling her they would see Earth one day. The siblings were just two of many, trapped in the ruins, waiting for a rescue that might never come. Back on Earth, the leaders of nations struggled to hold order. The president of Earth's United Council stood before cameras, her voice trembling but steady. "Humanity will not fall," she said. "We grieve for our brothers and sisters on Mars and Luna, but we will endure. We will rise." Yet even as she spoke, doubt spread in every mind. Could humans really rise against an enemy so powerful? Or was this the beginning of the end? The alien fleets did not stay. After striking Mars and Luna, they vanished into the void as quickly as they had come, leaving behind only smoke, rubble, and silence. Survivors crawled out of ruins, their eyes wide, their hearts broken. They sent final messages to Earth, videos of burned landscapes, voices of children crying for parents who would never return. Each message was like a dagger to those who watched. Humanity, proud and hopeful, suddenly stood on the edge of extinction. That night, Earth's sky was silent. No bombs fell, no ships appeared. Yet the silence was worse than any sound. It was the silence of waiting, of not knowing when the enemy would return, or if humanity had any hope of resisting them. People stared at the stars with fear, no longer filled with wonder but with dread, knowing that somewhere in that endless dark, enemies were watching. The first attack was more than destruction. It was a message. Humanity had been noticed. And in that silence, as smoke rose from Mars and the moon, The people of Earth understood one truth. They were no longer alone, and the galaxy did not welcome them. It was the beginning of a nightmare, and the sky that once gave hope now carried only fear. The council chamber was filled with voices rising like a storm, the air so heavy that even the walls seemed to shiver. Screens around the room replayed the horrors of Mars and Luna, each flickering image a wound no one could ignore. Leaders from every nation argued, their words cutting into one another. Some slammed their fists, demanding surrender before more lives were lost. Others shouted back with fire in their eyes, insisting that humanity must stand and fight, no matter the cost. The room smelled of sweat, fear, and desperation. At the center sat the United Human Defense Command, generals in uniform with eyes shadowed from sleepless nights. One commander leaned forward, his voice sharp. They came for blood, not negotiation. If we bend our knees, we'll only invite the chains. Across from him, a diplomat trembled, whispering, "But if we fight, we could be erased entirely. Do you want to gamble with the entire species?" The debate grew louder, turning into chaos until no one knew who was shouting anymore. Outside, Earth's population was already divided. Streets in New York, Shanghai, Nairobi, and Delhi filled with protesters. Some held signs begging for peace, believing humans were too weak to survive another attack. Others carried torches and flags, demanding vengeance, their chants echoing through the night. Fear and anger twisted together, and cities felt ready to erupt at any moment. People clutched radios and screens, waiting to hear what the leaders would decide, praying for a future that no longer seemed certain. In the council chamber, amidst the noise, one voice rose above the rest. A general with scars across his face stood, his gaze steady, his voice carrying like thunder. "We are not prey. They think we will crawl and beg for mercy, but they know nothing of us. Humanity does not kneel. We will show them who we are." His words struck the room like a blade, cutting through fear. For the first time in hours, silence fell, heavy and absolute. Some looked at him with disbelief, others with hope. A scientist at the far end of the table whispered of secret projects, weapons that had been hidden away, creations no one outside the darkest labs had ever seen. His words were almost drowned out, but those who caught them felt a chill. Humanity had been preparing, not for war with aliens, but for survival in the void. And now those secrets might be all that stood between life and extinction. The council did not vote that night. Too much blood had already been spilled, and no decision could bring back the dead of Mars and Luna. But something shifted in the silence after the scarred general's words. For the first time since the attacks, the fire of defiance burned through the fear. Humanity was wounded, terrified, and uncertain. Yet deep within that fear was something the aliens had not counted on. A resolve that grew stronger under pressure, a determination born not from power, but from survival itself. While the leaders argued through the night, ordinary people stared at the sky. Parents tucked children into bed with trembling hands, lovers clung to each other as if the world might end by morning, and soldiers in quiet barracks cleaned their weapons with grim focus. Across the planet, humanity waited. No one knew if the next sunrise would bring peace or the beginning of the final war. Beneath the restless oceans of Earth, where no light reached and pressure could crush steel, a secret facility pulsed with hidden life. Few even knew it existed. Those who did whispered of it like a ghost story, a place where human desperation had turned into invention far beyond imagination. Inside, corridors hummed with energy, lined with steel walls scarred from experiments that should never have worked. Scientists walked in silence, their eyes hollow from years of isolation, carrying the weight of a secret they could not share with the world above. Behind sealed doors sat the machines, prototypes built in shadows, weapons forged not for pride but for survival. Long before the first alien attack, visionaries had argued that humanity was not alone, that one day someone would test the strength of Earth. They had been dismissed as paranoid dreamers, yet they built anyway, in secret, creating tools too dangerous to reveal. Now those tools were humanity's only hope. One chamber held a cannon that bent space itself, crushing targets with invisible force. Another chamber contained sleek fighters coated in strange alloys, capable of disappearing from sensors like whispers in the void. But the most feared creation was hidden even deeper, locked behind triple barriers and guarded by soldiers who would die before letting it escape. They called it the Black Sun, a weapon that could unravel entire fleets in a single burst, but one so destructive it might consume friend and foe alike. The engineers spoke little, their hands trembling as they calibrated systems. They knew what they had made, and they feared it. Yet in the silence of that undersea fortress, they also knew this was no longer about fear. It was about survival. Outside, on the surface, politicians argued and citizens wept. Down here, humanity's answer to extinction was being sharpened. Late at night, one young technician stared at the glowing panels of the Black Sun's control room. He thought of his family in the cities above, of the burning images of Mars and Luna, and his heart ached with anger. He whispered to himself, "If they come again, they'll learn what humans can do." His words echoed in the empty chamber, swallowed by the hum of impossible machines. The aliens believed humans were weak, clumsy, and unprepared. They laughed at Earth's primitive fleets and fragile colonies. What they did not know was that the ocean floor itself held humanity's greatest defiance. The world above saw only grief and fear. But beneath the waves, the storm was already building, waiting for the next invasion to arrive. The stars vanished as their ships arrived, black silhouettes blotting out constellations that had burned for millions of years. They came in silence at first, a tide of steel and shadow spreading across the night like an eclipse. Then the sky cracked with fire. Engines roared, weapons lit up, and the second invasion began. On Earth, people woke to alarms, their windows glowing with the reflection of ships larger than mountains. Children pressed against glass, staring at the alien armada that seemed endless. Fear rippled through every city as governments called for calm, but no words could quiet the dread that spread with each passing second. The enemy broadcast their demands across every channel. Cold voices filled with contempt echoed in every home. "Submit," they said. "Accept your weakness. Humanity is nothing. Resist, and your world will burn." Their words were carried not with anger, but with certainty, as if humanity's defeat was already written in stone. On Mars and Luna, survivors still buried in rubble heard the transmission and trembled, knowing too well that the threat was real. But this time, Earth did not remain silent. From bases hidden under mountains and oceans, ships rose into the sky, their engines cutting across the darkness. They were not sleek or beautiful like the alien vessels. They were rough, scarred, patched together by human hands. Yet each one carried weapons the galaxy had never seen. Plasma lances charged with unstable fury, torpedoes wrapped in fields that bent reality, shields forged from desperate brilliance rather than tradition. Civilians watched as the first human fleets broke through the clouds, leaving trails of fire. For the first time since the night began, people felt something stir in their chests. Hope mixed with rage. Soldiers strapped into cockpits whispered farewells to their families, not knowing if they would return, but knowing they carried all of humanity's pride with them. The alien commanders laughed when they saw the human ships rise. To them it looked pathetic, tiny vessels daring to face their colossal war machines. They prepared to crush the resistance in a single strike, confident the battle would be short. But the humans did not wait. With a thunder that shook the sky, they fired first. Energy bolts streaked through the void, tearing holes into the alien front lines, explosions blooming like suns. On Earth's surface, the ground shook as the battle above unfolded. People covered their ears as windows rattled, staring at the heavens ablaze. The war had begun, and this time humanity was not kneeling. The second invasion had arrived, and the aliens were about to learn what their prey had been hiding in the dark. The void between stars lit up like a storm as the two fleets collided. Alien dreadnoughts, towering like floating fortresses, unleashed beams that carved through space itself. Human ships darted between them, smaller and fragile looking, but faster than expected, weaving in patterns the enemy had never seen. One squadron of human fighters dove straight into the heart of the alien formation, breaking apart at the last second and scattering like sparks. Behind them, torpedoes wrapped in unstable energy detonated, ripping a warship apart from the inside. The aliens hesitated. No one had ever dared to fly so close. No one had ever used chaos as a weapon. But humans thrived in chaos. Where alien tactics were rigid and calculated, human instincts were unpredictable, wild, and desperate. A battleship lost half its hull and still kept firing. A pilot with one wing left guided his broken fighter into the enemy flagship, taking it down in a blaze that lit the battlefield. Even as ships burned, even as crews screamed in their final moments, the fight did not slow. From Earth, billions watched the battle unfold on screens. Every explosion was a prayer answered, every human loss a wound that cut deep. In living rooms, bars, and shelters, people held their breath as alien fleets that once seemed invincible faltered. They had mocked humanity as weak, yet now their ships cracked open, one by one. The galaxy's predators were bleeding, but the price was unbearable. Cities on Earth shook as burning wreckage rained from orbit. Families cried as casualty numbers flashed across broadcasts, thousands gone in minutes, then tens of thousands. On the front lines, commanders shouted through static-filled channels, their orders nearly drowned by screams and fire. Entire squadrons vanished in single bursts of alien energy, leaving only silence in their place. Still, the humans did not retreat. The hidden weapons unleashed their fury. Cannons bent space like rippling water, crushing enemy ships with invisible force. Shields flared so bright they blinded sensors, holding against blows that should have shattered them. And when the black sun was activated for the first time, the battlefield froze. A sphere of light expanded outward, erasing 3 dreadnoughts in an instant. The explosion left silence so deep that even hardened soldiers forgot to breathe. The aliens who survived began to realize the truth. These humans were not prey. They were something far more dangerous. Creatures who fought even when outnumbered, who invented madness out of desperation, who turned weakness into a weapon. As another alien flagship tore apart under human fire, fear began to creep into the enemy ranks for the first time. The battle shook the stars, and though victory was not yet claimed, one fact became clear. Humanity would not die quietly. The galaxy was watching, and the legend of Earth was being written in fire. Smoke still hung over the battlefield when the signal went out. Across every surviving channel, through broken satellites and damaged relays, the image of a single human filled the screens. He stood in a dark command room, uniform torn, one arm bandaged, his face lined with exhaustion and blood. Behind him, the silence of ruined ships lingered, the glow of burning wreckage drifting across the void. His voice carried no anger, only a steady weight that cut through the static. This is humanity's final message. Attack again and face total annihilation. The words rolled like thunder across the galaxy. Soldiers paused mid-battle, survivors held their breath, and even the enemy fleets hesitated as the transmission reached them. The general's eyes did not flinch. His voice was not a plea, not a warning, but a sentence carved into stone. Every syllable carried the grief of the millions lost, and the unyielding promise that if the aliens struck again, Earth would unleash weapons that no empire could withstand. On Earth, families watching in crowded shelters fell silent. Mothers pulled their children closer, men clenched their fists, and in that moment, sorrow turned into steel. Across colonies, survivors on Mars and Luna stared at flickering screens, whispering the words to themselves as if they were a vow. Even those who doubted now felt the power of a species that refused to bow. Among the alien fleets, commanders listened, their arrogance trembling under the weight of what they had just seen. They had witnessed humans tear through ships far stronger than their own. They had seen weapons that bent the laws of nature, unleashed not by a mighty empire, but by a young species desperate to live. And now that same species had promised annihilation if challenged again. For the first time, the predators felt the chill of fear. The broadcast ended with silence. No anthem, no threat of conquest, no celebration, just the image of a man staring into the void, daring the galaxy to test his words. Then the signal faded, leaving only static and the echo of the warning. Across the stars, those who had mocked Earth now found themselves unable to laugh. The prey had spoken, and their voice was sharper than any blade. Whispers spread faster than light, carrying the words of the human warning to every corner of the galaxy. On distant worlds, rulers who once mocked Earth now sat in silence, their courts uneasy, their advisors shifting nervously as the message replayed again and again. Attack again and face total annihilation. Some tried to laugh, but the sound died in their throats. They had seen the wreckage of the alien fleet, the sudden end of dreadnoughts that had ruled for centuries. The laughter of humans had turned into fire, and that fire now haunted every empire. Merchants in crowded spaceports lowered their voices, telling stories of human weapons that could erase entire armadas. Pilots swore they saw alien commanders retreat without orders, their pride broken by fear. In the dark alleys of trade hubs, bounty hunters spoke of Earth with respect they had never given before, calling humans the wild ones, unpredictable and dangerous, creatures who fought like cornered beasts and came back stronger each time. On alien military outposts, drills changed overnight. Commanders shouted orders to prepare for scenarios involving humans, scenarios that until now had been considered laughable. Soldiers trained with unease, imagining enemies that would not surrender, imagining battles where victory felt like death itself. The thought of fighting humans twisted their stomachs in ways no other foe had ever done. Even the empires untouched by war hesitated. Some quietly reached out, sending diplomats dressed in silk and gold, offering alliances they would have never considered before. Others chose silence, hoping to avoid the gaze of a species that had proven its fury. And still, the galaxy trembled with uncertainty. Among the common people of alien worlds, fear mixed with fascination. Children whispered bedtime tales of humans who fought monsters with bare hands. Farmers carved crude human symbols into their barns, hoping the new legends would protect them. In the markets, traders sold recordings of the battle, grainy footage of fragile ships cutting through giants. Every replay planted the same thought in millions of minds. If humans could do this now, what would they become tomorrow? The species once seen as weak had shattered the illusion of power. The galaxy had lived with predators and prey for ages, but humans broke the balance. They were neither predator nor prey. They were something else, something that could not be predicted. And so fear spread, a silent storm, because no one knew when or where Earth might strike again, only that if provoked, the end would come with fire. Ash still clung to the ruins of Mars and Luna, smoke rising from the scars that would never fully heal. On Earth, entire cities held vigils, candles glowing like tiny stars against the night. Families wept for those who would never return, names read aloud in endless lists that stretched for days. Yet beneath the grief, something stronger was born, a unity the planet had not seen in centuries. Borders blurred, flags lowered, and humanity stood together, not as divided nations, but as one people who had faced the abyss and survived. Engineers and builders worked day and night, rebuilding shattered colonies, repairing broken ships, and crafting monuments to the fallen. Children grew up listening to stories of those who had fought, not as soldiers or leaders, but as humans who refused to surrender. The words of the final warning were carved into stone walls, printed on banners, whispered like prayers: attack again and face total annihilation. It became more than a threat. It became a promise written into the soul of humanity. Across the galaxy, silence lingered. No empire dared to strike again. No fleet approached Earth. Instead, ambassadors arrived cloaked in caution, their voices careful, their gifts generous. They bowed to the species they had once mocked, measuring every word, afraid to awaken the fire they had witnessed. Human leaders received them with steady eyes, no longer desperate for approval, no longer overlooked. The galaxy had changed, and Earth's place within it was no longer in question. Yet humanity did not boast. There were no grand celebrations, no calls for conquest. Instead, they carried their dead with honor and their grief with dignity. They rebuilt not to dominate, but to endure. And in that quiet endurance, in that relentless refusal to kneel, the galaxy saw the truth of what humans were. The night sky over Earth once again shone with stars, but people no longer gazed at them with simple wonder. They looked with caution, with pride, and with the knowledge that out there were enemies who might try again. But if they did, they would find a species scarred yet unbroken, fragile yet unyielding, small yet carrying the fire of worlds. Humanity had been tested, and in its darkest hour it had written a single unshakable truth into the heart of the universe. Earth was no one's prey.